Hello, everybody. You have these green paddles on your seats, and you're probably wondering if you're going to bid on something today. But actually, that's just to wave and cheer and shout your enthusiasm for Philanthropy in person. Woo! Thank you for being here today for Philanthropy Day, the hybrid edition. We build community, and some of you know that we sometimes build it with the lights out. We occasionally build it fully virtual. And now we're going where none of us have ever gone before, to a tent in the middle of a field. But we are so glad that you are here today with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a virtual, we have a live audience. And what many of you don't know is that CNE Philanthropy Day was started about 14 years ago. It was started at Farmington Country Club. And we have here today the person who is the founder of CNE, who started this crazy event. I want to say a brief hello to Wendy Brown. Wendy, where are you? Where's Wendy? Wave your paddle. There she is. So if any of you experience a little hypothermia or a little frostbite, let me know and I'll give you Wendy's cell phone number. I'm Christine Nardi. I'm the executive director of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. We are a champion, we're a learning partner, and we're an advisor for Virginia nonprofits. I'm your MC for today's celebration, but we also have a virtual host, and I would like you to say a loud welcome to Daniel Fairley over in the corner in the purple, our virtual host for today. So I want to extend a very warm embrace to all of you who are here in person. Please feel free to use your blankets. And I also want to say a hello to our virtual viewers out there. We also have a few watch parties. There are several watch parties across the region, and we're just showing you a few of them. So look at them. They have their paddles going. No problem. We're also excited to welcome Heather McTeer-Coney, our fabulous virtual keynote speaker for today's celebration. She'll be introduced shortly, but we want to bring her up on the screen just to say a quick hello to you. So I'm hoping that that works. Heather, can you join us?
I'm here. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can we see her? She's there. Okay, good. Heather.
Hello, everybody. I am bringing you much warmer greetings from probably where you're seated. I am in Oxford, Mississippi, and I'm coming to you from the indigenous land of the Chickasaw people, indigenous to Mississippi, but I want to bring you so many warm greetings. I hope you can feel it, and I look forward to having a great conversation with you today.
Thanks, Heather. And you just returned, basically almost just got off the plane from COP26, the Climate Action Conference in Glasgow. So tell us, do you still have jet lag?
A little bit, and you know, it's like one of the things that is keeping me from being there. I wish I could be there with you in person, but yes, coming back from the UK, we do have to put a little distance between travel just to make sure that we're all safe. And I'm so excited that so many of you are getting a chance to be with one another. So getting over the jet lag, but like any good person from the Southeast, you know how I got over my jet lag, Christine. I went to the Texas A&M Ole Miss football game. Yep, just right back into it. So
beautiful. Thank you. Well, we will officially introduce you shortly, but I just wanted to reassure everyone that we do actually have a guest speaker today. Thanks, Heather, and we'll see you in a bit. All right. So in keeping with today's theme of environment and climate justice, we've gone mostly paperless. For our live audience, you can find our program and lots of little whistles and bells behind a QR code. And you should see a QR code behind the seats of your chairs today. For our virtual audience, I think Daniel is going to put the program in chat. So that's great. And if you want to share today, if you want to share via social media, our hashtag for today is CNEP Day. So let's not forget what brings us all today. This is a community celebration of giving, and we've created a Black community, and I'm so excited about that today. We are celebrating the transformational impact that all of us can have whether we give of our time, whether we give of our talent, our treasure, our tithes, or our testimony, so that our communities and everyone in them can thrive. There is always work to do. There are always more challenges to overcome. There are always ways that we can do things better. But today is the day for us to breathe in, breathe out, and celebrate the fact that we've accomplished a lot in the last year and really in the last 20 months. So welcome everyone to Philanthropy Day. So on with the program, I'm very excited to introduce our amazing Philanthropy Day co-hosts for today. Will Marcella Fauché and Gloria Rockhold please join me on the Philanthropy Day stage? Please welcome them.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Gloria Rockhold, and together with Marcella Fauché, we're the co-chairs of this year's Philanthropy Day.
We have the best job of the program to give gratitude and celebrate all the philanthropists among us.
Thank you to our pillar of excellence sponsors, the Kaplan Foundation, the Remora Foundation, and Wells Fargo, and to all the other amazing sponsors that today's community celebration, a list of which you'll find in the virtual program.
Thank you to our Philanthropy Day host committee for their advice and guidance on how to bring this celebration together, and for their encouragement to us to be bold and see the COVID constraints as an opportunity to shake it up and try new things.
And of course, huge thank you to the CNE staff and board for their social sector leadership, support, and commitment to community partnership.
We would like to thank Juan Wade and Brian Kingston, our newest Charlottesville City Councilors, and to each and every one of you, our guests, for joining us, whether here in our tents, at our virtual parties, or from home or work office. You are the center of this celebration.
Have a wonderful experience. Muchas gracias.
So thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Gloria, for your kind and amazing leadership throughout this crazy and amazing year. Now we have a special surprise for you. I'm going to invite Gray McLean to come up on the stage. Gray, as you may know, is the founder of the Community Climate Collaborative. And we thought that it might be great to have a video for today. And so when I gave Gray a call, I asked, could you join us? Could you partner with us in creating a video that reflects our topic and the importance of today? So Gray, take it away.
Thanks, Christine. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you here today. When Christine called me and asked me whether I'd partner with CNE on this video, I jumped at the chance to talk about climate action here locally. As many of you know, or if not everyone knows, we're very fortunate to have very many environmental nonprofits that have major regional and state impact, many of whom are headquartered right here in Charlottesville and are some of my dearest friends. But when we talk about climate action, there's also another way to look at it, in addition to the great work of these organizations. And that's to look at climate through the lens of local community issues, including energy equity, equitable transit, and local food access. And through this climate lens, we see intersectionality of community issues and racial justice. Through this climate lens, we meet new leaders who don't have the word environmental anywhere around them, and organizations, and many will surprise you. So I'm really excited to share this video. Before we cut to the video, I want to extend a special thank you to Caetano Campos Lopez, who is the Director of Climate Policy at the Community Climate Collaborative. It's no exaggeration to say that without Caetano, all of these connections would not have been made and this video would not exist. So special thank you to Caetano.
This is going to sound paradoxical, but one of the things that keeps me going, that gives me some hope, is that as the climate crisis worsens, it becomes more and more apparent that we're getting to a place where people will have to respond.
This year I've been really inspired by a lot of great initiatives around transit and density, and specifically approaching those issues through a climate lens.
I work with a lot of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself, and as a teacher I have lots of immigrants in my classrooms. They do care about climate, but it's not their first priority right now because they have to meet their first needs.
In the area you need a car. In Blue Ridge you need a car. It's a reality. There's this connection where it's like if public transportation was more accessible, the immigrant community could use it more easily to get to work, to get to school, to buy groceries.
And that's what I think that climate action should be, should focus on the people who is most in risk, the people who is most in needs.
Looking at transportation through the lens of food, besides refining the scheduling and the timing for public transportation, also bringing food to those communities. There's this idea of food apartheid, where you have communities that don't have access to fresh produce.
The most alarming thing in the area is energy equity. And the community I work with, due to status, due to really material needs, they're relegated to housing that always has a greater burden on your utilities, on your services when it's really hot and it's really cold.
One thing what Richard said resonated with me was food is a right. It's been my mission in my career to say that healthcare is a right and something that everyone should be afforded.
We can show up to a 10-year difference in life expectancy based on where you live. A lot of the disparity is in Black and brown communities, and so what motivates me is my grandchildren and my belief that all children deserve to have their best opportunity to be healthy.
A lot of the time we see these really one-dimensional approaches to climate action where we ask, how can I as an individual reduce my carbon emissions? But what these solutions really fail to account for is who is able to implement them, which is generally the wealthy, and the wealthy are not going to be the hardest hit by climate change. That's why it's really great to see intersectional efforts around climate justice, because at its core, climate is an intersectional issue and it needs to be addressed as one.
If you care about racial justice, if you care about equity, all of these issues interconnect with that. And so that's the opportunity that we have. The good news about a lot of local climate solutions is that they both reduce emissions and they help our community adapt to the climate that is already changing.
So I feel like we are on the cusp of a great awakening, using all of our resources to fully address climate change and make the change that is necessary for ourselves, for our children and grandchildren and generations to come.
We really have all of the solutions that we need. It is a matter of collective will to put them in place.
The important thing is to do something, not to sit and watch. For years, and at the beginning, my language was broken. I couldn't speak it well. So I had a tape on my mouth. I wasn't able to say what I needed to say. But now I can. And I'm using my voice and I will speak it up.
Thank you to the C3 team for partnering with C&E to bring these local community voices to today's climate action conversation, and for setting up Heather's remarks so beautifully. So we all know that our communities thrive best through collaboration. I'm about to welcome somebody who knows a little bit about collaborating with communities, but first I want to give you some quick background. Since C&E's start 15 years ago, we have worked alongside and in partnership with almost every organization represented here, represented in our virtual audience, and even well beyond throughout Virginia. And you all have played an indispensable role in supporting our work, our collective work, to build a strong social impact sector. In fact, your work was the inspiration for creating a new framework that we introduced this year. Some of you may have heard about it. It's called the 7 Actionable Principles for a Strong Social Sector. This framework aims to build a common language, especially between funders and nonprofits, around what it takes to ensure that people and organizations that make up our social impact sector, those focused on quality of life for all, are healthy and sustainable. One of the 7 actionable principles is collaboration. And we've seen some powerful examples of collaboration across our communities, especially during COVID, including among funders. We know that donors in this community are participating in local, regional, and national donor funder networks to leverage their philanthropy for greater good, which brings us to our next guest. Fern Shepard has been president of Rachel's Network for the past 5 years. Rachel's Network is a community of women funders committed to a safer, healthier, and more just world for all. Rachel's Network and Heather, our keynote speaker, have a bit of a history, and we're delighted and honored that Fern accepted our invitation to introduce Heather today. Please join me in welcoming Fern Shepard to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here among real people. And thank you, Christy, for that kind introduction. So I am honored to introduce Heather McTeer-Toney to all of you. I first came to know Heather when she was one of our first recipients of our Catalyst Award. It is an award that Rachel's Network created for women environmental leaders of color. Heather embodies the spirit of that award with its emphasis on supporting women who are the leaders of meaningful change in our local and global communities. Heather immediately stood out to all of us, as I'm sure she will to all of you, because of her deep experience in public and nonprofit work. Before her current role as the Vice President of Community Engagement for the Environmental Defense Fund, she worked as the National Field Director for Mom's Clean Air Force. She was the Environmental Protection Administrator, Regional Administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency under President Obama. She was also the mayor of Greenville, Mississippi. She was the first African American, first woman, and the youngest person elected to that office. Heather stands out for her ability to meet people where they are, whether it's developing a climate-focused Bible study group for faith leaders or empowering parents to talk about the needs of their children's health to elected officials. Heather brings the climate discussion right to people's lives, their experience, and to their communities. She's also a prolific writer and advocate who elevates environmental justice to a broader audience and to policymakers. She champions the many unsung heroines of the environmental movement. And as she said in her New York Times op-ed, Black women are everyday environmentalists. We just don't get the headlines too often. Rachel's Network is far from the only organization that has honored Heather. Just this year, Heather received the 2021 Pritzker Fellowship at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics, and she was selected as the Elemental Accelerator Policy Lab Fellow. So I'm glad that the Center for Nonprofit Excellence is having Heather speak today as the keynote speaker for its Philanthropy Day. She has the expertise on environmental action and climate justice that I know you will all appreciate. She's tackled these issues from multiple vantage points and knows how to effectively deploy resources in the social sector. As you've heard, she's just back from Scotland. And so I am sure we have a lot to learn from all of her experiences. So please join me in welcoming Heather to Philanthropy Day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fern. I greatly appreciate that. And hello to everyone. Again, I hate that I cannot be there with you in person, but I am sending you warm vibes and warm thoughts. And I did just return back from Scotland, so I think I've got my fair share of cold weather in, but I know that there are so many of you that are just happy to see one another. This is such a beautiful time for us to talk about climate and climate action. And as I was watching the video, I wanted to shout, "The sleeper has awakened." You can tell I'm a science fiction and Dune fan, and I put that in the chat for those of you who are joining us virtually. Let's jump right in, because in reality, the sleeper has awakened. It is each and every one of us that are looking at all of the different ways that climate intersects the philanthropy work that we're doing and ties us together. Because over the past few months, more than a year, we have found that because of COVID, because of racial inequities that are prevalent throughout not only our own local communities, but our country and really the globe, that we have to connect to one another very deeply and authentically in order to really see solutions that we know can be efficient when it comes to climate action, but also to solving a number of the social issues that we have across this country. When I was at COP, the thing that stood out to me the most, while there was a lot of spotlight on the negotiations and many of the countries that were coming and talking about how we're going to stay at 1.5 degree or 2 degrees Celsius, God forbid we get there. But what really stood out to me were the men and women in the halls that were constantly talking about how to make it happen. It was the almost 50,000 people that were in the pavilions working together, whether they were representing community organizations, local governments, NGOs, or just moms and dads concerned about the future of their children. What was impressive were the young people who were constantly a part of the conversation, but also activists on the outside. These are the things that really show that not only is there hope, there's work to do. And that work takes practice. And that's what we want to talk about today. What is the practice? I'm reminded of a trip that I took. My father took my brother and I on to Richmond, Virginia. My aunt Dolores Brooks is from Richmond. That's where my father's family is from. And she lives in Churchill. And we, when I was 15 years old, drove cross country so we could go visit my aunt Dolores. And as any good family would be, when you come in from out of town, there is what? Food, a whole table full, more food than I had ever seen in a long, long time. But the favorite thing that was on that table, and if anybody, this is your favorite food, just go ahead and raise your hand. It was my Aunt Dolores's yeast rolls. Now, let me tell you about these yeast rolls, because her yeast rolls were not like any ordinary yeast rolls. She had yeast rolls that the butter sheen on top of the yeast roll, like literally pulled you into a table like a magnet and made you eat more than one. It was not your own fault. And during grace, I would pray that God just delivered me from the calories. But these yeast rolls, she was able to do, and there was no recipe. The only way you could learn how to do her yeast rolls was you actually had to be with her and practice it. Now at 15, I really didn't want to have time to sort of sit around with my Aunt Dolores and figure out how to make these yeast rolls. But they were so good and nobody else was figuring it out that I decided, you know what, maybe it might be worth me learning this recipe. And so I did. The first time I did it, they were horrible, because I didn't understand how you have to let the yeast go into the water, sit it in a warm space. It has to be the right temperature. It has to settle. It has to be mixed correctly. And then it has to be kneaded in. And there is a process that takes time. But she was patient with me. And she taught me. And again and again and again, we would do it until we got it right. Lord knows how many people had to eat bad yeast rolls, because there were quite a few. But at the end of the process, what she told me is she would roll them up in her hand and make 3 little balls and then pinch them up together at the top, was that all of the ingredients have to work together at the same time. And when they work together at the same time, everybody is fed. Everybody gets a piece to make sure that we are all happily as one family taking this moment to enjoy the process and the outcome. And when I think about how communities work, how families work, it's not always right. But there's a foundation that pulls us together, that makes us keep practicing it, that makes us keep working together, that makes us keep going back over and over and over again so that everybody is fed. And when we think about that concept with respect to climate and climate action, it becomes all the more important as to why we have to do this over and over and over again, regardless of what's said, regardless of what we may hear about who believes in climate change or who does not, or if one thing in terms of climate and environment is a higher priority than another. Because as opposed to us being on different sides or being divided, the reality is we're tied in one really big climate knot. This is one issue that pulls together economics, economic injustice, jobs, healthcare, education. Every single aspect of social justice can be found in climate and environment. And because of what we have learned from the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, a collection of the world's brightest minds on climate science, we know that we have a limited time to take action. We have a limited time to take action because the climate impacts are happening rapidly. Just this morning, we have seen accounts that are coming from the state of Washington of extreme flooding that has taken not only property, but lives of people today. We know from experience what happens to our farmers in the Southeast when they are ravaged by not only extreme heat, but hurricanes and tornadoes that wipe out crops, and as a result, have an impact to our food supplies and our food systems. We've seen the wildfires that have taken place out west. And while Hurricane Katrina happened 16 years ago, it is baffling that even in 2021, we had Hurricane Ida that came through in almost the exact same path on the exact same day. And the response has been that we've become so used to these things, we're not reacting in a way that is equitable. So what's the truth? What do we do? I want to share with you a few slides that are showing us not only the reality of how we think about climate and energy, but also what we're willing to do about it. Because this is such an exciting and engaging time. Philanthropy and community engagement is where it's at. You are in the center of all of the great stuff that's happening around the globe right now when it comes to action, community, engagement. It's you. So let's look at the truth of why it's you. I'm going to share my screen here. And it's going to let me share my screen. Yay. Perfect. I hope that everyone can see this. The University of Chicago Institute for Energy and Policy did a study on where Americans stand on energy and climate. And it's not what you think it is. It shows us that over half of Americans, including Democrats and Republicans, it shows that over half view climate change as a very, very, very important issue. And that has increased over the past 3 years. The science is becoming more convincing. People are not only reading and believing it, they are feeling it, and then they are responding with their own personal actions. In the video that we saw earlier, there was a young lady who made, I thought, a wonderful, profound statement that I hope we all can really embrace, and that is climate is an intersectional issue. And the intersectional issue is felt by everyone, but not equally. And so our individual actions sometimes can only be taken depending upon the wealth that we have, the privilege or the power that we have to take those actions. But that does not mean it's all that needs to be done. And so the study is showing us that, yes, people believe that climate change is happening. They believe in the science, and that most of us have actually taken some type of personal action to respond to what we have heard. The next slide is even more fascinating to me. I hope you're holding on for this one. most Americans are actually willing to pay for it. When the study looked at the support for a carbon fee or support for cleaning up communities that have been impacted by climate change, over half of our country would be willing to put money, even up to $100 of their own personal fund, to help nearby communities to clean up their environmental injustices. This is not what we hear every single day. This is not on the news. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that when we do a study, we find out there is a true sense of altruism among people who are in our country versus the seemingly divisiveness that surrounds us every day? I believe it's because people who are on the front lines of the climate crisis, as well as those who are in the study, in the policy, in the entrepreneurial side, all of us recognize that unless we are working with and touching one another, we can't get this done. And so things like implementing a clean electricity standard, we have more than half of our country supporting it because it means not just supporting climate, it means supporting jobs. It means people having food on their table, but also identifying a way that we can create wealth in communities that have been without. Entrepreneurship, looking at the green climate initiatives that are coming through both our federal government, but also private business, as a way to really expand opportunities for young people, for communities, and doing it in a way that we know how to do it in our own spaces. There's a huge, tremendous opportunity here. And the fact that we're able to work with one another, willing to pay for it, it says a lot. It says to us that communities like Manchester and Houston, Texas, where people literally live connected to environmental pollution, that we see them. I took this photo when I was visiting and working out in Houston on a health project with members of our team from Moms Clean Air Force. And I was astounded at the fact that there was a house and it's physically connected to an industrial site because there's no zoning. So what happens to the children who are living in this space, that are breathing this each and every day, that are surrounded by images of industry and pollution, but also have intricately tied it to their ability, their parents' ability to go to work? How are we now supposed to make choices and encourage these young people that there are other choices other than living next to pollution and underneath the power lines? But do you see the beauty in this photo? The plants, the fact that that front yard is simply covered in a willingness to see and be a part of greenery and living things regardless of where you are. That is the spirit of local people, of saying that we will survive, we will push through, and we will find any little crack in the concrete to make sure that we are sustainable, that we are encouraging growth, and that we are practicing it each and every day. So it moves us from who eats what risk. This is commonly our table. Is everybody coming? And this is a cartoon that they had at COP26 that I absolutely love, because this is usually the narrative is we're all going to come to the table, but when we come to that table, we are ready for war, representing our own individual spaces, what we are focused on and what is the priority, why we have to be so strong to ensure that our priority rises to the top. And that table often puts us at a place where we're like, okay, I guess we're all ready to come down and sit down and talk once again. But what do we accomplish? The reality is we have to come willing to understand that we have a common element. We all have something in common that we can work towards together. And if we figure out how to do that, we can become even more efficient in our work together. We can become even more successful when we begin to stop, listen intently and deeply to each other's stories, perspectives, and then understanding the critical nature of embracing climate and climate action and the opportunities that are now surrounding us. It's what takes us from this, which is the image that you may have seen coming from outside of COP26. I took this photo coming out of one of the nightly sessions where Extinction Rebellion was hosting a peaceful protest. And as important as it is to be inside of what's happening at COP26, it's also equally important to understand what's happening outside, so that the full picture of what's taking place is not only there, but we're understanding those stories and having conversations. But just like this was happening, so was this. It was the peacefulness and love and grief for the earth in the exact same spaces, exact same time, coexisting and showing that there are a number of different ways that people are engaging, they are talking, they are sharing, and we are finding solutions. And the efficient part of climate work and climate justice work is centering equity in all of this, finding those commonalities that bring us together. And so what do? This is one of my other favorite cartoons. The spirits say you have all the data, just do something. Just do something. That's why this is the moment, as opposed to us wringing our hands with what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do it? And we having, a meeting on top of the meeting plus the subcommittee meeting to prepare the agenda for the big meeting, us taking actions and doing something. Because people know what to do. Our people know what to do, they know how to do it, and they know and understand the overlap and the intersections. This is the most critical time for us to deeply engage in climate action. I have a 5-year-old and a 16-year-old. According to the International Panel on Climate Change, if we have not taken significant action before the time my 5-year-old is able to drive, which is in 10 years, we get to a space of irreversible impacts. And I want to explain what that means just a little bit, because we know what a water hose is. I'm from the South, so you play outside in the summertime with a water hose. We didn't get to run in and out of the house a whole lot because then you were letting the good air out. I'm still trying to figure out what good air is, but some of y'all know what I'm talking about. When you're outside in the summertime, you get water out of the water hose, you turn it on and you turn it off. When you turn that spigot off, there's still water in the hose. It hadn't come all out yet. Well, if we were to turn off the spigot of climate pollution today, there's still pollution in the hose that's going to pour out into communities. And the communities that it's going to pour out into are the most vulnerable among us. They are the poor communities. They are communities that do not have the infrastructure and the resiliency necessary to not only protect the community from climate impacts, but to even be prepared for future building, resiliency, and renewable energy measures. It's what folks talk about when they say, what good is renewable energy if you don't have a solid grid to put it on? And so the most vulnerable among us will be the ones that suffer, the people who live in what we call the sacrifice zones, the places that have been left behind because they are the ones that do not have the wealth nor the political influence, and they didn't have it before, they have it now, to make this significant change. So the water that's left in the pipe right now, if we were to turn that spigot off, within the next 10 years, might put us in a situation where my 5-year-old is dealing with climate impacts that we cannot even begin to imagine what they are. As a mother, I am not willing to let that happen. I know many of you who are listening sitting under the tent with one another. And those of you who are joining us virtually can think of your own family members, your own specific areas that are near and dear to you and that touch you and that you work on each and every day. And there's some place and some point where you're willing to say, nope, not going to give that up, not going to do that, not going to allow that to happen. That's why this moment is so important. Because philanthropy is one of the few places where people are willing to not only come together, but do it in a way that is practicing making those yeast rolls like my Aunt Dolores. It is us practicing physically mixing together all of the ingredients from our different spaces to come up with something that feeds everybody. It is us taking each and every part of ourselves, whether it is our resources, our expertise, it's our commitment to making sure that we survive, that gets us to the place where those yeast rolls are drawing us to the table. There are climate solutions, and our togetherness and our climate solutions will draw people to the table. It will draw the communities that not only we serve, but the resources that we need in order to make it happen. I am beyond ecstatic because what I saw at COP26 in those hallways, sitting on the floor, having coffee with one another, inside and outside, the diversity of generations, the diversity of countries, the diversity of socioeconomic status, people who got there just by the skin of their teeth versus those who flew there on private jets. The willingness for people to sit down and say, we have to figure this out right now at this moment is what is going to get us across the finish line. I hope that you are just as excited as I am. I am really looking forward to having deeper conversations as we really get into this work, but also as we're able to really go from this being a moment to a true movement of climate action that for years to come, we're going to continue to work on and expound in a multitude of ways. Thank you so much. I know we're going to go and get into some questions now, but just know that this is our moment. And if we jump into it right, I think we have an opportunity to truly be a catalyst for solutions around the world. Thank you, and let's go to some questions now.
Thank you, Heather, for framing climate action and climate solutions in a way that touches and includes us all. And now I'm excited to welcome to the Philanthropy Day stage, Andrea Douglas. Andrea is the Executive Director of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. Come on up, Andrea. Andrea had the opportunity, yes. Andrea had the opportunity earlier this year to be in conversation with her through the Jefferson School's Evelyn Barber Lecture Series. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, you can find it on Jefferson School's website. I encourage you to do that. And she's going to take up where they left off as our Q&A moderator. We are going to start with questions from Andrea, but we encourage you to ask questions from the floor. We will be coming around with mics if you have them. And we also are welcoming questions from our virtual audience through Daniel. So Andrea, take it away.
I can't hear Andrea, so I don't know if she's speaking or not.
Can you, Heather, how about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, yay. So I am really excited to be able to have this conversation with you again, even though I can't see you, but that's fine. Because when we invited you to the Jefferson School, it was really because you were who we considered to be a climate warrior. someone that was in the trenches from the early stages till today. And so I think I want first to have people get to know you a little bit more, just from this notion of it. So what would the Heather Tony, there you are, I can see you now. What would the Heather Tony of 2021 say to the Heather Tony of 2004 about the road that she has traveled to this point to get you to this room?
Hold on for the ride. I definitely would say hold on for the ride and be open about what climate and environmentalism is. You know, in 2004, I didn't know what an environmentalist was because nothing that I saw reflected my own image. I thought that people who did environmental and climate work were white people who hugged trees and they were vegan because that's what I saw. And so as a young woman growing up in the Mississippi Delta, a very agrarian society, even though I was surrounded on every side by water, agriculture, the way that just the seasons move and change, hunting, fishing, I never saw myself as an environmentalist, even though that's the very definition of what an environmentalist is. So it really wasn't until Lisa Jackson came to visit my city when I was mayor and said, you know, you're doing environmental justice work. I said, no, I'm just trying to get clean water and work on jobs for the people in my community. She said, no, that's EJ work. And it was a reframing of what I knew as being a climate and environmental activist to include social aspects of my life and the people around me, but it also became interpreting that and being more inclusive to the things that impact us every single day. So as the daughter of my father is a retired civil rights attorney. I'm an attorney. My mom's a retired school teacher. I began to see voting issues through the light of climate action, because the majority of people who believe that climate is not only impacting our everyday lives are the same people who are being suppressed from voting. I began to see health and equity and education through the lens of climate impacts. And every single day it became more and more prevalent and real to me that the work that we do among our most vulnerable populations, our poorest, our elderly, our children, are directly tied to climate. So if we can begin to connect those dots, we can get solutions much faster and get funding to people who need it in a way that they can solve more than one problem at a time.
And I think that's a really key point that you're making there, this notion of being able to solve more than one problem at one time, and understanding that climate isn't just, we have to save the polar bears. It also is, we have to think about the polar bears, but we also have to think about how people get food, which leads me to the question of intersectionality. We've heard the word spoken more than one time this afternoon. But if you were going to try and define for us a kind of ecosystem of how does it look to do more than one thing at one time, where would you place some best practices? How do we go through the process of doing more than one thing at one time, when sometimes it feels really daunting?
So as I think a mother, and I'm just speaking from my own personal lived experience, I can only be who I am, which is a Black woman of faith in the state of Mississippi. I'm a mom and I'm a wife, and I like to write. I have a full-time job. So being multifaceted and multitasking is a part of my everyday life and lived experience. I don't have the privilege to not do that. And I think when we talk about climate action, we have to consider that from a social and community perspective, we don't have the privilege, the people who we serve don't have the privilege to not think intersectionally. They have to multitask. You can't choose between whether or not your kids are going to eat or if they're going to put on clothes to go to school the next day. Somehow or another, we're going to figure it out. And guess what? People of color, people who have been impoverished for years have been figuring it out. Now, we might not have had everything we needed to do, but we've been figuring it out. So there's some lessons that we can take and we can learn. Climate action and environment is not one of the many boxes that sits on the table of issues. It's actually the table that all the issues sit on. So whatever the issue may be, if it is education, for example, let's talk about the fact that we have infrastructure needs in some of our most impoverished communities that include ventilation. They include the need to update the infrastructure so the infrastructure of the actual school building can be solid and resilient so that we have a place for our children to go to school, so that we have water runoff in a way that does not make our children have to walk through floodwaters just to get to math class. There are a number of different ways we could intersect what we need for our children to make sure that they have access to equitable climate discussions and the building structure in itself that can add us getting to talking about climate curriculum, talking about different ways that we are intersecting what jobs are going to be available in the climate and environmental space. And that's just talking through the lens of education. So I think, again, we look at climate action as the table. We also take into account the lived experience of the people that we're serving, the fact that they figured out how to do more than one thing at one time. Why can't we?
Wonderful, wonderful. Daniel, did I say that there was a question that came up?
Yes. Oh, you all should not have given me a microphone. Yes, there is a question that came up. This is from Joe Plummer. And Joe says, how can nonprofit in the communities plug in, climate change joke, to programs associated with the new infrastructure bill and influence how and where the new infrastructure is being built? How do we center community conversations related to new infrastructure on climate justice? Very detailed question.
Very good question. And I will start by saying nonprofits have to stay and always be plugged in. And I want everyone to hear this, and I'm being very transparent here. You can't just jump in and parachute because there's money on the table. Because communities have been living with these issues, and they know if they've seen your face or not. They know if you've been there or not. So one of the things that NGOs can do, I know we've done and we're doing at EDF, is making sure that these conversations are community-led, making sure that we're building trust in spaces that show we're not parachuting in and out, but we are genuinely coming to be part of the community. Nonprofits have to be part of the community. So you should have people who are in the community as part of the nonprofit. And listening deeply to what those needs are. Sometimes that means listening to the administrative assistants, custodians who are in your buildings, that are listening to people who may not be on the steering committee of the infrastructure bill, but they have the lived experience of what you're trying to do. So being very inclusive of, I think, communities that we want to serve is a step one that sometimes is missed. Now, step two is, I think, understanding what is coming down the pipeline, what is in the infrastructure bill that provides a platform and a tool and a resource for nonprofits to leverage funding coming from the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and it's a $1.2 trillion bill. At least $50 billion is in the Environmental Protection Agency alone. So there's a plethora of tools and resources that will be available. But here's the key. We have to leverage. We have to look for spaces where we can take funding that may be coming to an academic institution, a local government, a hospital, and leverage it with our philanthropy dollars, leverage it with actual work and business and industry that's happening, because that's how we multiply money. That is how we take this opportunity, and it's not a one-time shot in the dark, but we're creating space to build. That's what we're looking for in this moment. It is taking this $1.2 trillion and being able to just say that's a seed in the ground for what we know can happen with real community engagement. Because realistically, $1.2 trillion, while it is a lot of money, it is a tremendous amount of money. It is not going to solve all the problems that we know exist in a lot of our neighborhoods. There are street and infrastructure building projects that we need to do. There's broadband projects that we need to do. There are hospital and healthcare projects. And the way that we leverage this money is looking at spaces where we can use climate action, where we can intersect issues. So here's an example, and I am just saying this may be something that is going to happen. Money that's coming down through the infrastructure bill that's going to come to EPA that will focus on brownfields, that will focus on legacy pollution sites, cleaning up legacy pollution sites. Legacy pollution sites, more times than not, they are located in minority communities and communities of color. So if there's going to be funding that comes to clean up a legacy pollution site, and you can identify one in your area, then you have a wonderful opportunity for some people in the community to plan, get your engineering firms that are there locally who want to donate some dollars and time and resources to planning out what the site will be in conjunction with what the community wants to have happen. Look for your jobs and your veterans folks to come in and talk about workforce development training, to engage in electrical EV training job opportunities. And that's one space that we have. We can look at how we can talk about citizen science and education for our young people and curriculum to test the soil and partner with maybe companies who are willing to do the soil testing that's necessary when you're cleaning up a legacy pollution site. Look at Savannah, Georgia, and Dr. Mildred McLean, who had a program, still has a program that has taken young people from the community and trained them to be the ones that actually do the cleanup. So you're providing jobs in the particular community and area. And, hey, that's just getting started. We haven't even talked about the legal, the accounting side. There are a number of different spaces and opportunities where that money that may come from one particular agency can be partnered with not only local business and local government, but philanthropy efforts to multiply it such that the project keeps living. That's where we need to begin looking. See what's happening in that community, on that legacy pollution site, what that community wants to do with it, and then have the community lead us into how to utilize that funding. Community-driven solutions can be intersectional, but they're also life-giving because people want to maintain their communities.
Heather, thanks so much for that great roadmap. So unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. So we're going to take it from the audience. We're going to take the question here.
Hi, my name is Susan Cruz with the Community Climate Collaborative. Thank you, Heather, so much for being here and for speaking with us today and for all your good work. So one of the things that we realize in our work here is that there's the interim goal of reducing emissions by approximately half, but then there's the long-term work of moving our communities toward carbon neutrality, which I think some of that work has to happen now as well, right? We need to be positioning our communities to make sure we're bringing everybody forward and addressing these issues. Do you find that leaders, at the world stage and all the places you work are ready for those conversations about how we're planning our communities? It has to do with zoning, it has to do with transit, it has to do with where food grows in our communities. How are leaders ready for those conversations?
So yes, absolutely. Leaders are ready for that conversation. I think leaders are having that conversation. One of our little hangups might be language, how we're having that conversation, because we can talk about carbon trading and the need to be net zero and carbon initiatives. But when you go into a neighborhood, they're going to look at you like, okay, what the heck is a carbon what? And why are we trading it? And what does that have to do with the price that I need to pay for milk and eggs in the grocery store? So making it very relatable to people such that they're able to take it from this being this abject idea into something that you can feel or sense with your 5 physical senses makes it real. And when we talk like that, then yes, people are absolutely ready, because reducing carbon emissions means that in your neighborhood, not only are you going to be able to breathe easier and have better health results for your children in the community, it also means that there's an opportunity for new technology and job growth in that particular area, just by reducing carbon emissions. Getting to the space where we are cleaning our air and talking about how our planet is going to survive equates to having a better job. It equates to creating space for people in our community, and it equates to us having a better connectivity to one another. I think leaders are maybe struggling a bit with the language side of having the conversation, but they are definitely having a conversation. I'll add one more thing. I know we're running out of time here, but I think it's important for us to understand globally that global issues around climate impacts are also driving why we need to have these conversations in communities right now. Climate migration is major. There are places on this planet where climate change has already reached an impact where people have to move. There will be shifts. Some of the things that we may identify as being very partisan political issues in reality are simply climate migration issues that we're seeing happen globally. So when we have these conversations within communities and talk about things like carbon, but in a way that creates a space for us to prepare our communities and adapt and become resilient communities, because we know that there are global things that are happening that give us an opportunity to really step into a positive space, then I think that is a part of that language. It can get wonky for some people, but again, I think folks really need we need to bring more folks to the table to just talk through it, keep having the conversation, and normalize these terms. Normalize the terms like what is a carbon credit? And if we're going to exchange and trade carbon credits, what is the impact and benefit for my community? Is it benefiting somebody else in another country? Are we planting trees in Brazil? Or y'all planting trees along the major roadway coming through Charlottesville? It makes a difference to people. So talking to people in the language that they know, I think helps our leaders to push the policy a bit better.
Heather, thank you so much for that, the lessons that we've learned today. Some of us will have additional opportunity to speak with you later, but as always, I am always better for having heard your ideas and what you're concerned about. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. You all are doing amazing work. Keep it up. Just keep it up.
Thank you, Andrea. And good news is it's just about a wrap, because I think we're all starting to freeze, are we not? So if you're in the virtual audience, I hope that you had some snacks along the way. If you are here, you can see outside the tent that we have bagged lunches for you, and we hope that you'll grab one on the way out. While we are not yet completely clear of COVID, whether you're a nonprofit staffer, whether you're a board member, whether you're a community partner, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a donor, here's the thing. Your work is needed now more than ever. Heather demonstrates that. The good news is that our collective challenges, whether we're talking about climate action, whether we're talking about public health or social justice, or all of those intersecting together, as Heather has told us, they have opened up new program opportunities for us. It's shifted our thinking, and we also have a unique opportunity and vision to go farther faster. So let's not let up. Let's take care of ourselves and each other along the way. And I look forward to all the community building we can do together in the next year. Thank you all.